Hey, thanks for watching Creative Muse. I'm Myra.
My name is Kale, and this is our guest, Lou. Lou, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Super exciting.
Glad to be here.
Where are we today?
We're in the studio, Thurman Studio. Kind of been helping them out, working with them.
Hell yeah.
And yeah, it's a very creative spot to be. I feel very privileged to be here.
Absolutely.
Every day.
Thurman Statham, the sculpture artist, for those of you who do not know, he does glass sculpture, which you can see behind us. Very awesome place to be. It's just like a big warehouse near downtown Omaha. So hell yeah, it's awesome to be here.
So if you kind of want to get started and let us know maybe what happened with your eye patch and what's going on there.
Yeah, we might as well get started there.
I just had an incident. I work with a lot of different materials, and I'm always running around. I got a red eye, and then the doctor told me to just rest it. So I put a patch on. It's going to be popped a vessel, so I think in about a month of healing.
Wow.
But you're still working. That's good.
Yeah. One thing that I did notice is that I'm kind of embracing it.
Yeah.
At this point, I want to see what life is like if I actually lost this eye. And I could tell that life is becoming harder.
Definitely. I know you said something about like accepting your deficiencies, essentially.
Yes, I think that especially if you really want to create something pure and genuine, you have to embrace your shadow. You have to embrace your deficiencies. You have to work with what you have.
Yeah.
Not all of us are born perfect, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
The fact that my eye's temporarily out of service right now could impact the art that I create, just simply because I don't have that reliability, or that I don't rely on my two eyes right now.
Yeah.
So in a way, I kind of is embracing the downfalls of your life. It's almost like putting a new challenge to yourself and having that open mind to that something good could come out of something bad.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I know that you did also mention, like, when something like this happens, it gives you a new perspective, right?
Yes.
So I guess you want to explain how you said it?
Yeah, and one thing that I kind of acknowledge is that sometimes we get so sidetracked, our ambitions get us so sidetracked on our physical form that we forget that we're almost like a temple. Our body is our tool. And sometimes it's necessary for these things to happen to bring us back down and say, no, we got to take care of ourselves. And
absolutely.
sometimes we become too ambitious on what we're doing that we forget to eat right or to put the right protection on.
Yeah.
And with that said, this is allowing me to value my body a little more, because it's not permanent and it's not always going to be there.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I think it ties into self-discipline probably a little too. And that you could look at that from multiple different angles. I think one of the things I've started to kind of investigate a little bit more, and I want to do a lot more research on it, is things like martial arts, things like yoga, but just practicing that mindfulness, but then also letting that translate into your body. I know, like with Reiki, you could definitely talk about that, Myra, of the mindfulness of your different chakras. And
are you familiar with what Reiki is?
Yes.
Okay. So
Very
I
cool.
started practicing Reiki, and I actually got to practice on Kale. So you're welcome
nice.
to let me practice on you. So yeah, it's just like realigning those different parts of your body and different energies that make up your physical body, but they're always tied into your spiritual body or to your emotional body. So a lot of times you'll feel like you're having a hard time with like an itchy throat or sore throat, and that might indicate that you're having a hard time communicating something you've been needing to communicate.
I think that a lot of us, we don't see the connectivity between the outside world and the inside of us is all
absolutely
relative. And the way that we feel inside definitely alternates how we see the world outside.
Yeah.
And how we see the world outside definitely affects the way we feel inside.
Yeah.
So if you could really put a deep bridge between the two and realize that one without the other doesn't exist, it makes you more intimate with yourself and with your surroundings.
Yeah.
And sometimes
definitely.
we just let our senses like take over, and so then we forget to reflect what's inside of us, because we're actually being told and taught since we're little to look at and feel things from the outside instead of from the inside out.
Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot with hunger recently because I'll feel hungry, but then I'll kind of think to myself, okay, but am I actually hungry? Because I think there is a difference between craving and wanting something, right? And then actually needing something. So I've been, one of the things that I want to try to get into is veganism. And so trying to transition from a meat diet to a plant-based diet. And I can tell that there's going to be resistance. Like, I know that my body is going to be like, or at least maybe not as much my body, but more so my mind is going to say, oh, I really want this thing, or I really want that thing. And one of the big things is sugar. Like, I cut out sugar a while back, and right now there's like one thing that I eat, or maybe a couple different things that have sugar in them. And I can tell when it's the craving because my body is saying, hey, you want this thing specifically. Like, you want to eat this, as opposed to just, I'm hungry, I need something to keep me going. Because in that case, I could eat just about anything. So I've kind of started substituting, saying, okay, when I get that craving for that thing that I've already eaten enough of today, I'm going to go eat something else and see if I'm still hungry. Like, because if I am, then it's probably just a craving.
Yeah.
I agree with that, and I like to continue with that with the idea that I've been trying to embrace my pain. I noticed that all my life, anytime that I felt pain, my instant reaction was to get away from it.
Yeah.
And I forgot one of the main things with pain is that it's there for a reason, and it's trying to alert you about something. And instead of just automatically trying to get away from it because it's not something it's not a pleasant feeling, I want to start taking my time to really understand what is the pain that and not necessarily am I talking in just regards to physical pain, but also emotional pain.
Yeah.
To really be able to sit there and experience it, to see why the pain is there. And it's to me, it's almost an act of bravery because we don't like to see our shadows. We don't like to see what hurts us, our delicate side.
And it takes courage to talk about those things, to actually, it's one thing to reflect on it for yourself, but it takes courage to talk to someone that you care about and actually reflect on it out loud. Because if you don't speak it out loud, then those thoughts are just going to go away and those feelings are going to remain.
Right. Well, and it's impossible for anybody to know your perception.
Exactly.
I mean, the only way for that to ever happen is for you to be honest and open about it and be able to share it. So I think this kind of goes into what I think we were talking about a little bit before we started filming too. And it's just that there is a certain way that we were raised to believe and raised to think. And now that we're older, we've kind of gotten to this point where we're starting to be able to question those things a little more and say, like, the pain thing I think is awesome because I've been thinking about that a lot recently as well. Is, okay, why am I feeling this pain? Not how do I get rid of it? Because, if I just go to that every single time, I'm never going to fix the underlying problem.
You're never going to understand what's causing that pain.
Yeah, exactly. Because, I mean, not necessarily just physical pain. I think in a lot of cases, this is emotional pain. When I'm depressed, why am I depressed? Like, what put me in this mind state, and how can I get myself out of it? Rather than saying, oh, I feel depressed, I'm going to go eat a bunch of chocolate, or I'm going to go do X, or, whatever it is. I'm going to go smoke a bunch, or I'm going to go, whatever it is.
One thing, while we're on this topic, one thing that I've been kind of learning recently is that if you really kind of become more aware of your pain and pleasure mechanism, you realize that it's not just like a reward. It's more like a radar. The amount of pleasure that you seek, or the pleasures that you seek, really tell you where your soul is heading to. And by soul, I mean your energy, the energy that keeps you alive. So if you really are aware of what's causing your pleasures and what's causing your pain, then you could really reprogram it to find the values that you really want out of life.
Yeah.
And by that, there's you could just, why do I seek pleasure on stimulants, or why am I seeking pleasure in instant gratification?
Yeah.
Asking all those questions is really it might be the issue that you're sacrificing a long-term goal because you're constantly seeking instant gratification, and you don't have the room for that long-term achievement. But by sacrificing instant gratification, you realize that there could be a bigger reward at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That kind of gets me worried for like our future generation, because right now with phones and everything, like people are just instant gratification is something that's taught from an early age. I see that
Definitely.
with like kids from my family, and they just expect things versus like learning how to actually become aware of the things that they have and being aware of like what they don't have, and they just kind of don't learn that perspective, so
Right.
it's kind of difficult. But
Yeah, there's kind of like a thought process of more
Yeah.
always, right? And you're right, we don't think about, okay, what do I already have? Like storage facilities is something that Lou and I have talked about a lot, is like when we see a new storage facility go up, it kind of breaks your heart a little bit, because you're like, oh, so people didn't have enough room for all the stuff that they had, and so now they have to have a place where they're going to put it, where they're not even going to be thinking about it, where it's
Yeah.
just sitting there. And it's just, it's unfortunate. I know I kind of talked with my parents and my grandparents about it a little bit too, and I think it was my dad. He had made the point of, well, sometimes people have seasonal stuff and they put it away or whatever. But I guess my thought process is, well, maybe you just shouldn't have that much stuff, because if you didn't have as much stuff, you probably would be able to find room to
Yeah.
store it. Moving into an apartment from a house definitely taught me that. Like that was huge for me, because
One thing that I've
yeah.
And speaking of that, I've always been conscious of the stuff that I have, and I'm a procrastinator and I don't like responsibility, but that alone has given me the privilege to not own a lot of things. Because I feel like everything that I become ownership of, I have to be responsible for.
Well, and I think you probably just like to have the most responsibility for the things that you really care about.
Yes.
Like you actually want to show that you really care about the things that you care about.
I want to give room to the things that really matter. I don't want to be thinking about my furniture. I don't want to be thinking about I need this new thing. What I want to do is liberate my mind so I could actually become more creative.
Well, you're more free that way, ultimately.
And that's kind of what I like brought up for like this year, 2020. But to be more conscious about the things that I'm purchasing, the things that I'm bringing into my home, and the amount of waste that I'm like putting out in the world,
Absolutely.
So
That's smart. That's great.
It is smart.
yeah,
I know I want to get rid of a bunch of the clothes that I have.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I'm not even wearing them now. Like, I haven't worn this shirt for a while. This is a new shirt, but I've been wearing the same probably like, I don't know, 5 to 10 shirts for the past
yeah.
who knows how long, like probably
Yeah.
months.
Maybe you
at
could
this
learn
point.
to repurpose too, though.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
true.
there are going to be people that need them or whatever.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really like you just need to throw it away. It's time,
Yeah.
Like there's holes or whatever,
That's true.
But yeah.
I think it'd be cool to get into the repurposing though, like
Yeah.
you said, like being able to make clothing or whatever from old stuff, because you can patch stuff together. You can make stuff that people are like, wow, I never even would have thought of that.
That's a new creative way to express your creativity too,
Yeah.
something that you're not used to.
And that's a new practice that we got to start incorporating, because I like to think that a lot of us are getting accustomed of, it breaks, throw it away, get
Yeah.
a new one.
Mhm.
But we never realized that material could be used for something else.
Yeah.
More than, that VCR doesn't work, then it's junk. No, there's plenty of components in there that we could utilize for something different.
Yep.
And we're not taking that time to actually consider those facts. We just say, no, we just need to replace it.
Right. And even if it's not us that's going to be doing the repurposing, like there might be somebody you know of, or there might be somebody within your network somewhere. Like I know there's this one guy that I know who used to work at Apple, works at LinkedIn now, I think, and he rebuilds different electronics. So I've been trying to reach out to him now and be like, okay, could you fix this? Is this something you could fix? And then if he can, like, if it's something I don't need and it can either go to him or go to somebody else, like, by all means. And then people are actually getting some more longevity out of that, rather than, like you're saying, just go buy a new one. Like toasters, I think, are a huge, one. And I'm sure there's a lot of those like small appliances that's like, man, when I moved, I just bought a new toaster, because they're so cheap.
But those are things that are hard to actually recycle.
True.
Like where I work, we recycle electronics, but sometimes like things that have had food in them, it's like a whole new category, and it's harder to actually dispose of it or repurpose them.
That's
so
true.
I think coming up with like better technology to be able to repurpose these things key.
And
And
maybe avoiding technology that isn't repurposable.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah,
kind of
creating, yeah.
It all starts with our mental. If we start thinking about repurposing it, then we can start redesigning our products to be repurposed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it starts with our idea that we don't want to keep wasting something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The consumer has a lot of power by requesting that, hey, yes, I understand that it's convenient, but I also have a conscience to know that I don't need to be affecting
Yeah.
the world.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's something I think being globally minded is huge for our generation too. And I think we're definitely realizing it more and more, you know, when we see things like climate change and just how much the world is changing, whether or not we have an impact in that. And I think we do, at least to, you know, some extent. It is taking responsibility for that. You know, one of the things that I worry about, I know the painting I have from you is Mother Earth.
Yeah.
And I think that's fitting because I've started really thinking about that. And I think, you know, Earth is kind of figuring out that we're almost like a parasite in some cases, and that it's probably going to exterminate us in some way. I mean, we've been seeing a lot of more storms. There's chances of like sea levels rising and stuff like that. You know, like Venice is underwater now, and who knows what's going to happen with New York City, one of the biggest cities in the world.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's definitely something we could talk about as well.
Yeah, I like to think that we don't give enough credit to Mother Earth as a conscious entity.
Yeah.
I like to think
Right.
that it's just like our home, that it has no spirit, but I think that it's a living organism
Yeah.
on its own. And
Me too.
I think that we're part of it, just like cells are part of our body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the more connectivity we could have with it, I think that not only do we direct our path at a better angle, but it helps us be more content with ourselves.
Yeah.
Because I like to think that there's an emptiness in all of us because we're not really directed the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're constantly searching for that void. And I don't think that we're going to find it by pursuing monetary ambition.
No.
If anything, we have to trace back and reprogram our values.
Yeah.
To really become one with this world.
And maybe that's where we could talk about what you were talking about earlier with sharing. Because I love that philosophy, and I think you opened my eyes to that more than anybody. That painting that I was just talking about, that Mother Earth, you gave it to me. And that kind of, it broke down a lot of things for me, because at the time I was definitely in this mindset of, I kept thinking to myself, man, Lou, you shouldn't be just giving these things to people because they're so, you know, beautiful, or they took you a lot of time, or they cost you money, or whatever. But when you did that to me, it definitely made me think, man, I should be doing that. I should be finding things in my life, and some of those things might be important to me, but being able to give something to somebody that you care about is, I think, one of the most impactful ways that we can change the way that we do things, you know, today. I think, you know, money, definitely, we kind of talked about how that diminishes over time, and eventually somebody ends up with all the coins.
At the end of the day, someone is always going to end up with the coins. And the only way that we retain that from happening too fast and having our collapse of our civilization is by sharing, by utilizing each other, by being able to take what we have or what we build or the accomplishment that we have and being able to share with the rest.
Yeah.
And we could go far as individuals, but how much further do we go as a unity?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And not until we all become aware of the power of that, we won't be able to
Right.
access it.
And have you thought of, or do you already have any projects or pieces that you've used, like recycled materials, or are most of them that way? Or
Yeah, when it comes to art, you're always repurposing.
Mhm.
Most of the time, it's very inconvenient to just go buy new.
Mm.
And the reason why that is because things that have been around for a while, they develop a character to themselves. Time is marked in a lot of the wood. For example, you could get a piece of furniture and look at it, and you could really mark time just by looking at it, because the world's constantly changing.
Yeah.
And the wood that we had in the 50s is not the same as now. So a lot of artists have started to realize that they could get more appeal to their art becomes more aesthetic when they use things that remind people of other purposes.
Mm.
I have a friend that's taking old furniture and making canvases with them, but he leaves enough detail where you know that was part of a chair. You know that was part of a door frame.
Yeah.
And not only do you get the beauty of his art piece, but you also get a trace back in history that belonged to, that was a part of someone else's life,
Yeah.
and it played a huge effect on it, and now it's here.
And
It's an
that thing
artifact.
that thing had its own life, and
Yeah.
you know, you kind of
And
recreate that.
I find that it's almost like a storytelling by that point, because you
Yeah.
almost want to investigate where all these parts came out.
Right.
Whereas by just buying new, it takes away that idea, that long. I like to think that I come from somewhere, that I just didn't come out of the blue, and so I like to think that the art had that history also. That
Yeah.
it became that because of the different things that are happening.
That just inspired two thoughts for me. One was, I know Bart Vargas is somebody that you really look up to, and he repurposes a lot. I mean, I've followed him on Instagram. One, he's really funny.
He's an awesome man.
Yeah, he's just a funny guy. But then, his art is really cool, and I know he was working on something with a bunch of plastic bottles and stuff like that. But then the other thing you made me think of is in movies. I love movies that you'll watch the movie, and then they'll bring up like a book, or they'll bring up a song, or just whatever it is. Like a lot of my playlists recently I've been making based off of movies that I've been watching, because I'll hear a song and I'll be like, oh, that's a really good song, I'm going to put it on this playlist. Or I'll hear about a book from a movie and I'll go, oh, I should look into that. Or I'll look up characters' names sometimes, because sometimes it's just hidden in the names of characters, and you're like, oh, they were actually named after this, famous philosopher or scientist or whatever it is.
I really like the idea of taking other stuff and making something different with it.
Yeah.
And it really helps. That art, I feel like it really helps everyone, because we're so used to seeing products act one particular way. Like, this is a box and it stores things.
Yeah.
But when someone takes that box and makes it into a table, then it kind of makes you realize that, why can't we do that with other stuff?
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm so romanticized with that idea is because I like to think that I don't just serve one purpose, that I could become purposeful in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, actually.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting that you say that, because that was another thing that came up in my conversation with my dad. Is we were kind of talking about how having a limited perspective about people too is not, I mean, it's very closed-minded, because people have many different purposes and many different uses. And I think, honestly, that probably helps us live longer, is when, instead of saying, oh, I have one determined job that I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I mean, we just know the world isn't like that, really.
No.
But it's also like vice versa. Sometimes people are wanting to do everything. You can't do everything, You have to dedicate yourself to one thing and kind of master it, and then you can move on or develop into a new thing.
So I think it is kind of that balance too. I definitely think myself, like, I try to do too many things at once sometimes. And so, figuring out time is huge. If you can say, okay, here's this one thing, this is probably the most viable idea. Like right now, my most viable idea is this podcast. And so doing this podcast and being able to sit down with creative professionals and get these ideas out is huge. But I have a million other ideas. I have a million other things I want to do. They're just not as viable, so I need to organize it. And I think that's probably the biggest balancing act of that whole process. Yeah.
I agree with that.
Hey, Lou, do you want to talk a little bit about your work, what you do, and your style?
Well, I like to elaborate a little bit on my history, especially because we're talking about purpose.
Yeah.
I didn't really know that I was going to become an artist till later on in life. I was searching for security, and it was something that I had growing up. My parents made it clear that security was what I needed to research. But when I went to college for construction management and I ended up going in my career, I realized that nothing is secure in this life. That everything's a matter of chance. And if I was going to gamble on this chance, I might as well do what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I decided to completely get away from my career and start creating. And the reason why I started creating was simply because I could buy my identity through a job, or I could search deep inside of me and express it out. And to me, that's a more genuine way of defining who I am as an individual. I know that we all like to show the world our individuality, because we want to show who we are. And some of us do it through our performance, some of us do it through our expressions, some of us buy our identity.
Yeah.
But I came conscious that I was going to cut the middleman out. Instead of working for someone I didn't like to give me a check so I could go buy my identity, I was just going to go create it.
Yeah.
And it became simpler to me, and that's the fuel of my career and lifestyle, is to constantly find new ways to show the world the beauty
Right.
through myself. If I could show the world that beauty comes out of me, then I could show them the beauty could come out of them too.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really beautiful. Well, and I think that is the beauty of being a creative and being able to create things, because you're not just taking things for granted. You're saying, okay, but what are the actual answers to these questions I have? And so that's huge.
And I think that it's not just something that it's a duty that we all have to do to really get to know ourselves, to really take time and really identify who am I, and not necessarily just your highlights, but also your deficiencies. How am I human?
Yeah.
What mistakes do I make? And it's
Right.
hard to stare at those. But once you embrace yourself truly, you really could start climbing forward in a progressive way.
Absolutely. Well, and that takes a lot of honesty, ultimately, I think, and being honest with yourself and being honest with other people. One of the things I've been doing more and more now is just not ever really lying. And, even if that's a hard truth to tell, I'd much rather people know who I actually am than think I am something else. So
I agree.
Hell yeah. Well, Lou, you've always been a huge inspiration to me.
Thank you.
Yeah, your work.
I love you, man.
Yeah, I love you
guys.
too, man. Hell yeah. And I know we're going to be creating a lot more
Yes.
great things together in the future. Is there anything else you want to talk about as far as like your music or your painting or?
No, just in the last note, I just want to tell everyone that not just creative people need to create. We all need to create.
Yeah.
We all need to take our time to really bring something out of ourselves to show the rest of the world. Even if it's something that we don't want to see, it's necessary. It's a health. Just like we want to exercise to make ourselves healthier, creativity is an exercise that makes the mind healthier too.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Awesome.
That's a good place to wrap up. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time
Shout
on
out
Creative
Jorge.
News. Shout out Jorge. Yeah.